Picture this. You wake up, and the nearest supermarket is 600 kilometres away. The nearest hospital is a flying doctor called by satellite phone. Your children go to school through a radio, and outside your window, in every direction, there is nothing but red dirt and silence stretching to the horizon. This is not the 1800s. This is Australia right now. Today, while 90% of Australians live within 100 kilometres of the coast, a handful of communities exist so deep in the interior that most Australians have never heard their names. These are not ghost towns. These are not abandoned places. These are living communities where people wake up every morning and choose this life deliberately. 10 towns, ranked from remote to genuinely unreachable. And I need to warn you about number 1 before we begin. It is the most isolated community in Australia. The nearest neighbour is further away than most people drive in a month, and people choose to live there every single day. Number 10, Coober, Pedy, South Australia. Most towns are built on top of the ground. Coober, Pedy is built underneath it. 850 kilometres north of Adelaide in the South Australian outback, Coober, Pedy produces more than 70% of the world's opals. That single fact explains why people live here. What it does not explain is how. Summer temperatures regularly exceed 50 degrees on the surface, so residents built their homes underground. Churches, hotels, a bookshop, a museum, a backpacker hostel, all carved directly into the rock. The technical term is dugout. The practical result is that Coober, Pedy is a town where you can walk down a suburban street and see nothing but bare earth, because everything is beneath your feet. Current population is approximately 1,700 people from over 40 nationalities. It is one of the most multicultural places per capita in Australia, which makes sense when you consider that the opal fields attracted waves of migrants who had nothing to lose and everything to find. The town has no permanent surface water. Every drop is trucked or piped in. The landscape surrounding it is dotted with mullock heaps, mounds of excavated earth from opal mining that stretch to every horizon like a lunar surface. Locals call unregistered mine shafts the real danger. There are thousands of them, unmarked, unfenced, open to the sky. One resident who has lived underground for 23 years told me she cannot imagine living on the surface anymore. The temperature underground stays at a constant 23 degrees year-round. No air conditioning required, no heating required. The earth itself is the infrastructure. Number 9, Birdsville, Queensland. The population of Birdsville is 115 people. Once a year, during the Birdsville races, it becomes 7,000. Located at the edge of the Simpson Desert where Queensland meets South Australia, Birdsville sits at the end of the Birdsville Track, one of the most legendary outback routes in Australia. The nearest town of any size is Longreach, approximately 600 kilometres away, on roads that can become impassable after rain. The Birdsville Hotel has been operating since 1884. It is simultaneously the social hub, the community centre, and the primary reason most visitors make the journey. The pub serves meals to everyone, from grey nomads to indigenous stockmen to international tourists who drove 4 days to get there. What makes Birdsville genuinely remarkable is not its isolation, but its stubbornness. The town has existed in this location, in these conditions, for over 140 years. Floods have cut it off for months at a time. Droughts have made water a premium commodity. The artesian bore that supplies, the town produces water at 99 degrees Celsius that has to be cooled before use. The Royal Flying Doctor Service makes regular visits. The School of the Air serves children across the surrounding region. These are not conveniences. They are the infrastructure that makes permanent habitation possible at all. 115 people, 600 kilometres from the nearest significant town. Still open. Number 8, Marble Bar, Western Australia. Marble Bar holds a record that nobody wanted and nobody has broken. From October 1923 to April 1924, the town recorded 160 consecutive days of temperatures above 37.8 degrees Celsius. 160 days, without a break. 1,800 kilometres north of Perth in the Pilbara, Marble Bar has a current population of around 150 to 200 people. It is named not for marble, but for a bar of jasper crossing the Kungun River nearby, which early settlers mistook for marble. The name stuck. The heat never left. The town exists because of gold discovered in the 1890s. At its peak, thousands of miners worked the surrounding fields. The population has never recovered those numbers, but the town never fully emptied either. People stayed. More arrived. The heat became part of the identity rather than a reason to leave. The ironclad hotel, built in 1893, still operates. It is one of the oldest continually operating hotels in Western Australia. The corrugated iron construction that gave it its name is exactly as practical in extreme heat as it sounds. which is to say, not very, but it has survived cyclones, floods, and 130 years of record temperatures regardless. One long-term resident described the summer as something you either make peace with or leave. Most people who stay have made peace with it, the ones who cannot leave within the first year. Number 7. Oodnadatta, South Australia. The Pink Roadhouse is the reason Oodnadatta exists in any meaningful sense today. Located 1,000 kilometres north of Adelaide on the edge of the Simpson Desert, Oodnadatta has a current population of approximately 200 people, predominantly Aboriginal. It sits on the old Garn railway line, the original route that was famously unreliable due to flooding, and was bypassed when the new Garn line was built further west in 1980. When the railway left, the economic reason for the town's existence left with it. What remained was the Pink Roadhouse, operated by the Oldfield family since 1980. It functions as a service station, general store, accommodation, tourist information centre, and community hub simultaneously. In a town this isolated, one business performing all of those functions is not unusual. It is survival. The surrounding landscape contains Kati Thander Lake Air, the largest lake in Australia when full, which occurs rarely enough that it becomes a national event when it happens. The Arabana people have maintained connection to this country for thousands of years. Their presence in and around Oodnadatta predates the railway, predates the Pink Roadhouse, and will outlast both. Summer temperatures regularly exceed 50 degrees. The Oodnadatta track, the unsealed road connecting the town to the outside world, becomes impassable after significant rain. There are periods when Oodnadatta is effectively an island in a sea of mud. Number 6. Kew, Western Australia. In 1892, gold was discovered near Kew, and a town appeared from nothing with the speed and confidence that the Western Australian gold rush produced everywhere it touched. At its peak, Kew and the surrounding fields supported thousands of people. The architecture that remains reflects that ambition. The Murchison Club Hotel, the courthouse, buildings constructed from local stone with the intention of permanence. Current population is approximately 200 people. 650 kilometres north of Perth, on unsealed and sealed roads, through mulga scrub and red dirt country. What makes Kew interesting is not what it lost, but what it kept. The heritage streetscape is largely intact. Buildings that would have been demolished decades ago in any town closer to a city have survived simply because nobody had a reason to replace them. Remoteness as preservation. The surrounding Murchison region contains some of the most ancient geology in Australia, formations that have remained largely undisturbed for billions of years. The landscape looks ancient because it is ancient in ways that most landscapes are not. One visitor who spent a week there described the silence as physical, not the absence of sound, but the presence of something that silence in cities never achieves. The nearest traffic noise is hundreds of kilometres away. Number 5. Tibooburra, New South Wales, the furthest town from the coast in New South Wales. Further from the ocean than any other permanent settlement in the state, Tibooburra sits in the far northwest corner of New South Wales, 330 kilometres north of Broken Hill, on roads that require caution in dry conditions and genuine preparation in wet ones. The population is approximately 100 people. The two hotels that anchor the town, the Tibooburra Hotel and the Family Hotel, are both heritage listed and both still operating. The town sits within the corner country, where New South Wales, South Australia, and Queensland meet. The Dingo Fence, the longest fence in the world at over 5,600 kilometres, passes through this region. Someone has to maintain it. Some of those people live in Tibooburra. Artists have been drawn here for decades. The remote landscape, the extraordinary light, the silence. The Tibooburra Hotel walls are covered in paintings by artists including Clifton Pugh, who came through in the 1960s and left work behind. An outback pub as gallery, maintained not for tourism, but because it was always that way. Summer temperatures exceed 50 degrees regularly. The flies are described by every visitor as an experience unto themselves. The nearest hospital is in Broken Hill. The Royal Flying Doctor Service covers the region, but distance remains a factor that residents calculate into every medical decision they make. Number 4, Farina, South Australia. The name means flower in Latin. They chose it because they genuinely believed wheat could grow here. It never did. Not once. 540 kilometres north of Adelaide, annual rainfall approximately 150 millimetres. At its peak in the late 1800s, 600 people lived here. 2 hotels, an underground bakery built below ground level to escape temperatures exceeding 45 degrees, 5 blacksmiths, a school, a church. The railway relocated in 1980. The last permanent residents left shortly after. Farina became a ghost town in the most complete sense. And then something unexpected happened. In 2008, Tom Harding formed the Farina Restoration Group. Every year between May and July, volunteers travel up to 600 kilometres to restore the town stone by stone. In 2018 alone, 205 participants donated over 18,000 volunteer hours. The underground bakery, dormant for nearly a century, produces fresh bread daily during restoration season. The cemetery has an Afghan corner, headstones with English and Arabic inscriptions facing Mecca. The cameleers who made outback logistics possible are buried here, in a town that forgot them, being restored by people who drove 600 kilometres to remember. Nobody lives in Farina permanently, but it is not empty either. It exists in a category that most places never reach, somewhere between ghost town and living community, maintained by people who have no obligation to be there and come anyway. Number 3. Innamincka, South Australia. Most Australians know the name Burke and Wills. Few know that this is where the expedition fell apart completely. Innamincka sits on Coober Creek in the far northeast of South Australia, roughly 1,100 kilometres from Adelaide. Current population is somewhere between 10 and 15 permanent residents, depending on the season, making it one of the smallest permanently inhabited settlements in Australia. There is a general store, a pub, a Royal Flying Doctor base, and not much else. In 1861, Robert Burke died near here. His body was found by a search party weeks later. Wills died in the same region days earlier. The Yandrawanda people, who had been living along Coober Creek for thousands of years, had offered the expedition food and assistance. The explorers, through a combination of pride and poor judgment, rejected help that might have saved their lives. The Coober Creek waterhole system that flows through Innamincka is one of the most ecologically significant inland water systems in Australia. After significant rain events in the catchment, the creek flows and fills a network of waterholes that stretches for hundreds of kilometres. Pelicans arrive from nowhere. Fish populations explode. The desert briefly becomes something else entirely. Then it dries, and Innamincka goes back to being 10 people, a pub, and the ghost of 2 explorers who refused the help that was offered. Number 2. Kalumburu, Western Australia. The most isolated town in Western Australia that most Western Australians have never heard of. Kalumburu sits at the very top of the Kimberley, 400 kilometres north of Oodnadatta, on roads that are only accessible in the dry season. During the wet season, which runs roughly from November to April, Kalumburu is completely cut off by road. The only access is by air or sea, for months at a time, every year, without exception. Current population is approximately 400 people, predominantly Queenie and Balangara Aboriginal people, whose connection to this country predates European contact by tens of thousands of years. A Benedictine mission was established here in 1932 and was bombed by Japanese aircraft in 1943, killing several people in the only direct attack on a Western Australian community during World War II. The surrounding country is extraordinary. Waterfalls, gorges, ancient rock art, coastline that receives almost no visitors, because reaching it requires the kind of preparation that most people are unwilling to undertake. Crocodiles in every waterway, extreme heat, wet season flooding that transforms the landscape completely. One pilot who has flown supply runs to Kalumburu for 15 years, said the community's relationship with isolation is fundamentally different from how outsiders perceive it. For the people who have always been there, the remoteness is not a hardship, it is the condition under which their culture has survived. Number 1. Suplejack Downs, Northern Territory. There is a cattle station in the Northern Territory so remote that the nearest town is hundreds of kilometres away on unsealed road. The nearest hospital is in Alice Springs. The population is approximately 10 people at any given time. There is no mobile phone coverage. There is no reliable internet. There is a satellite phone, and there is the flying doctor, and there is the land. Suplejack Downs is a cattle station in the Tanami Desert, one of the least visited regions in Australia. Not because it lacks interest, but because reaching it and surviving it requires a level of preparation that filters out everyone except the genuinely committed. The people who work Suplejack Downs are not there by accident. They chose it. The isolation is not something they endure. It is something they selected from all available options and decided was worth the trade-offs. No traffic, no neighbours close enough to matter, no noise that was not made by wind or cattle or the occasional wedge-tailed eagle overhead. Families with children face choices that families in Sydney cannot imagine having to make. Boarding school from age 5 or 6. Children growing up separated from parents by distances that turn a weekend visit into a logistical operation. What the Tanami has in exchange for everything it takes is silence so complete it becomes something else. Space measured not in blocks, but in days of driving. Sky uninterrupted by anything humans have built. And the particular freedom that comes from being genuinely, completely, Irreversibly, far from everything else, 10 people. Hundreds of kilometres of dirt road from the nearest town, still there tomorrow. Most Australians will never visit any of these towns. Most will never need to. But the people who live in them are carrying something the rest of the country quietly depends on and rarely thinks about. The proof that this continent is habitable, all of it. Not just the comfortable coastal strip where most of us live. That is worth knowing about, even from a distance. If I got anything wrong, tell me in the comments. These communities deserve to be represented accurately. Subscribe and comment which town you would actually want to live in. I am genuinely curious whether anyone picks number 1.